in. Did you want to start with the first part, Clint, or do you want me to?
So I guess I'll start with one thing that I just added to the notes. A lot of people have been sending in questions this week, which we love your questions. But it seems like a lot of them, if you guys were to just take the time to read the robot manual, the game manual, and the tournament manual, a lot of these questions were answered. So in the notes below, we are going to quote where you can find them in the manual. But we do encourage you guys to read all of the robot manual, all of the game manual, and all of the tournament manual before you start making any modification to your chassis or building any part of your robot, because you could be modifying something or building something that is illegal. And if you build something that is illegal, you will not pass inspection. And if you do not pass inspection, you cannot play with the robot that you just spent 6 weeks building. So that's just a tip for you guys. Clint, sorry, go ahead. We're on have a moving chassis.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the questions that people are also having about a moving chassis is, you know, supply of different suppliers having what they want, what they don't want. It's kind of hard to really determine what suppliers are going to be able to have in their stock. So you really should be trying to have some kind of chassis, understandably.
Clint, I just sent you the link to the agenda, so we can go ahead. Do you want me to just read the questions?
Yes, do that. I'll answer questions. You read it, I'll answer it. I'm not by a computer.
All right. So all of you guys who are rookies, you should have received your AM14U3 in your kit apart chassis. If you do not have your chassis built, you need to get it done now. That needs to be one of your highest priorities right now, is to have a moving chassis. We are nearing the end of week 2 of build, and you need to have this done. So the first thing that we want to talk about is modifying your kit apart chassis. Please note that out of the box, if you do not cut anything, your chassis is not legal. Clint?
Yeah, and I forget the rule number off the top of my head, sorry, but the rule that you have to look for is the frame perimeter. Your frame perimeter for this season can only be 120 inches. The robot section of the manual does a really good job of showing you how to determine what your frame perimeter is. And so the way you do it is if you were to take a string and wrap that around your robot, right in the area where your bumpers are mounted, that would be considered your frame perimeter. Now, if you have an opening for, like, say, an intake to take in the boulder this year, the string would actually, if you put a string across that, it would actually span the gap or span that opening. So it doesn't go into any U-shapes or any shapes of the frame. It actually spans across that and goes to the other corner. The other thing about this, so the kit apart chassis, I forget what the dimensions are, but I think you have to take about 4 inches off of one dimension. Probably the easiest way is to take the width of the robot and shorten it a little bit to make sure you're within that. So if you were to have a square robot this year, you could have a 30-inch by 30-inch robot square, and that would be considered illegal. Be careful, because when you go to an event, you really don't want to be at 120 exactly. It's better to be at like 119 and a half. That way it gives you a little bit of wiggle room in case anything is sticking out or protruding to make your frame perimeter bigger than what you expected.
And that doesn't include your bumpers, right?
Yeah, that does not include your bumpers.
Frame perimeter.
Yep. Yep. And the bumpers is a whole other section that I don't know if it's on the agenda to talk about later. So that's what I have about frame perimeters. I don't know if anybody has any other questions.
So I guess the next question on the agenda part is how many wheels will you have, and then what kind of wheels to use? I guess on Team Rush, we've been doing a little bit of research on number of wheels to have and locations and sizes. So we've kind of looked at a couple different configurations between 6-inch wheels, 8-inch wheels, pneumatic wheels, regular solid wheels. So we've kind of come up with a combination of we're using 2 I believe 8-inch wheels, 8-inch pneumatic wheels in the middle, with some 6-inch wheels at the end to help navigate the bumps. In last week's call, I sent or included a link to a video done by a group of students at a university in Montreal that kind of went through a couple different configurations of the robot, basically of the kit chassis with different wheel sizes and what worked best to go over the obstacles. And they found that a 6-inch wheel in front and then 8-inch pneumatic wheels seem to do well on most of the obstacles.
Yeah, to let you know a little bit about Team 2337, we did some testing last weekend. We actually took, I think it was a 2014 kit of parts chassis, so the AM14U, version 1, not version 3. We put 8-inch tall wheels that were 1 inch wide, and with that configuration, I think the spacing between wheels was like 13 or 14 inches. That robot was able to navigate all 4 of the passive defenses. That's meaning, you know, the rock wall, the rough terrain, the moat, and the ramp parts. It was actually able to do that without pneumatics, without tank treads, without any of this fancy stuff. It was able to defeat 4 of the 8 defenses. Now, the other defenses are active mechanisms, so it isn't as easy as just having a drivetrain.
Did you say those were pneumatic wheels or just regular solid 8-inch wheels?
Solid slick wheels, nothing fancy.
Okay.
Not saying that
the rough terrain and what else?
Ramp parts. Not saying that other drivetrain options are possible to make it better, not to say that we can never get stuck with that design, but I guess my hope is if you just take some 8-inch wheels, 6 8-inch wheels, you put it on the kitted park chassis, you can navigate these defenses, you know, and go over it. You don't need to have, like you said, pneumatic wheels and tank treads like everyone thinks you have to have.
And that requires no modification to the kitted park chassis, correct, except for switching the wheels?
Yeah, switching the wheels and making sure you put the bolts in the correct holes to allow for the 8-inch wheels to fit. So.
This is Danny with 6066. We just have the kit apart and not a lot of money, but I have a very talented mentor, and we have just nothing, and we have the kit apart, and we got over all of those things today.
Yep. Yep. So you're saying you're using 6-inch wheels, correct?
We use whatever we got in the box.
Yep, that would be 6-inch.
Yep. And so they did a design and they just built it and they got over, I don't know, 4 or 5 of the different things just today at their meeting.
Nice.
Yeah. So the 6-inch wheels, the situation you get is you bottom out a little bit on a couple of the different defenses. Not saying that you can't make it across with a little bit of speed or momentum, if you will, but you do have issues where it starts to bottom out a little bit. But yeah, it goes to show if you build the stuff and test it, you can get over it. But please also note the practice version and the real version are going to be different because one's made out of wood and the other one's going to be out of powder-coated, you know, steel and going to have polycarbonate on it and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people are freaking out right now because they can't get 8-inch pneumatics and they think 8-inch pneumatics is the only solution to this problem.
Okay, so there's a lot of wheel discussion, chassis discussion. Does anybody else have any other questions?
And then I guess the one last thing I'll put in here is a small plug because some people have been saying they can't find 8-inch wheels from Andy Mark. You know, bias aside, I have a business called the Robot Space, and we sell robot parts and accessories, and we have plenty of 8-inch wheels in stock. So if you go to therobotspace.com, look up the 8-inch traction wheel. You can actually, they're available, ready to purchase. The only thing that you need to do is make sure you buy tread to wrap around those 8-inch wheels if you want to use 8-inch wheels.
And if you need those for the weekend, they can be ordered online or picked up tomorrow in Lapeer if you need them for the weekend. So if you're waiting for stuff to come back in stock from Andy Mark, They're available right here in Michigan and Lapeer tomorrow.
Do you find that you people have to modify the hubs or anything for the different wheels?
So the wheels are different from the standard kit apart chassis. Vex Pro, if you go to vexpro.com, they actually have a tutorial in their example section that allows for you to show you how to take an AM14U and swap out the wheels with the Vex versions of that. So they are slightly different. I'm not saying it's a quick, a simple add-in as you swap them out and you're good. Anything straying away from the kit apart chassis 6-inch wheels, you're going to have to do some different modifications and movements to get that to work. Even if you went with the pneumatic ones, you have the same problem.
Okay.
Is there any other questions? Okay. So the next thing on the notes was just to make sure that you try to get your chassis built as soon as possible. Again, to be able to get up and driving and practicing and going over those elements. So is anybody having trouble getting their chassis up and running? Okay, good. So everyone's got a running chassis. That's great.
No, we've just downloading the those instructions to get the connection between the Roby Ion and the computer. So that's just one of our challenges to get it all working.
Okay, so you're working with getting the programming stuff together?
Yeah, that's where our hassle is, because we just don't understand it yet, but we'll get there.
Okay, but mechanically you've got your chassis built. Yeah, you can push it around. Okay.
Oh yeah, mechanically it's ready. It's just we're just got to get it all wired up and.
So you're getting close.
Yeah, we're getting real close. We hope to do it this Saturday. Finish it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yep.
We have a really simple tutorial that walks you through the steps. It's what we walked through at our kit apart chassis workshop that I can include with this week's notes. Our programming team put a thing together where you follow step by step and you click on these links and it tells you exactly what to do. So I can include that in the notes this week.
Yeah, thank you. That would be great.
Is there anybody else? If you guys don't have your chassis built, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. We want to help you. So if you need help, please speak up.
Our chassis built. It's just technical stuff to get done. So.
Yep.
And I just like to, can I chime in right fast?
Yep.
We have our chassis built. We just don't have it modified. So we're in the process of pretty much, learning how to drive it, and we'll modify it this week in order to meet the specs of what the committee is looking for.
Oh, the size? So you need to shorten it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we will have to shorten it, yes. So we haven't done that yet.
Well, that's good. You at least have it. You've got, something that's moving around, which is great to have at this stage.
And the modification is not that hard. You just need to take out a couple bolts, cut a couple boards, or cut a couple pieces of metal and then put it back together. So if you're just going to make a less wide chassis.
Yeah, I think our biggest concern is going to be the wheels. Right now, our biggest concern is the wheels. So we still have the out-of-the-box 6-inch wheels. So we're going to have to figure out what we got to do. After we modify our chassis, we'll see what kind of obstacles we can go over.
There's a lot of teams that are just using the kit bot, like right out of the box, with just it made to the correct frame perimeter, that are navigating at least 4 out of the 9 barriers. So that's pretty good.
Okay.
Straight out of the box, it will do 4 out of the 9 barriers. So that is not a bad place to be sitting.
I have a question. When we get our robot running, or at least the chassis running, is there a contact at Kettering that we could go and call to be able to go in there and try it out?
Yeah, I can get a hold of the guy who's in charge of the FRC Center and get his contact information for you guys and exactly what you have to do or who you have to have with you in order to use it. They've, I think, changed their policy from last year. Last year it was really difficult to get in there, but they're trying to make it more accessible. So,
Brandon, there is a so I have another thing to talk about later. This probably doesn't follow the agenda, so we can talk about it later. But Kettering's has some opportunity for carpet that we can talk about later in the call, or unless you want me to talk about it now.
No, we'll wait and talk about it later so we can get through the agenda first.
Okay.
All right, the next item on our list is strategy. Clint, you have the agenda open?
Yeah, I do now.
All right. We're on item number 3 if you want to get started with that so I can add to the bottom.
So once again, people need to make sure their chassis is moving. Once you have that, you need to start determining, you know, by now you should be kind of starting to figure out what you want to do, not how you're going to do it. You know, now that you start your chassis, that's going to start dictating maybe what defenses you can navigate over, you know, what other modifications you might need to do your robot. If you want to complete, let's say, 4 out of the 5 defenses, you know, do you need to have an active mechanism to drop down the cheval de frise teeter-totters, or do you actually need, you know, some kind of mechanism to lift the gate of the guillotine, or the, I forget what it's called, portcullis. Yeah, portcullis. Yeah. So you need to start figuring that out. Yeah, the door. The guillotine is like we like to call it.
Yeah.
The other thing that you need to start looking at is what you're going to do with the boulders. I feel that this year, out of any, you can have a chassis that can be fairly competitive at the district level, that can go over most of the defenses and just be able to move a boulder from one location to the next. So from the neutral zone in the center, over the defenses into the your opponent's courtyard, and that would be something that a lot of teams would look for. A lot of people might be looking at Chief Delphi and YouTube videos and seeing people shooting the high goal. For young teams with low resources, it's a great stretch goal, but I don't think it's necessary to be very competitive at the district level. Being able to have a roller that sucks in a boulder, and then you spit that back out into a low goal, like I said, that'd be very advantageous. So don't ignore the low goals, especially if you can guarantee you put it in every time. People that shoot to the high goal, if your shot percentage in the high goal is probably less than 80 or 90%, you probably shouldn't be shooting in the high goal, because the amount of time it takes you to get that ball back and take another attempt at shooting it, it won't be worth the time and effort to do so. By putting in the low goal, this will allow for you to be able to, you know, challenge at the end of the match and capture, which is a ranking point. In order to challenge, all you need to do is drive up the batter of the tower and get those points. Now, you don't need to completely defeat the tower in order to challenge at the end of the match. So you get those points no matter what. And then the next thing to look at is your scaling. Scaling, for the amount of effort needed to be put into it, I'm not saying teams aren't going to do it, but there's a lot of, it's almost a whole other mechanism just to give you 10 points, and that's all you get out of it. Now, the reason I say 10 points, I know the rules say you get 15 points, is if you just drive on the batter, you get 5 points for that. But if you were to scale, you then would get an additional 10, totaling for 15 points total. It's a 10-point differential. So I would say I caution people of doing that because crossing, I say crossing another defense, spending time to figure out how to cross 1 or 2 more defenses reliably is more valuable than trying to scale in the last 20 seconds. But that's my opinion. Take it for what you will. And then the final thing about strategy is, what are you going to do in autumn? there's a real simple way this year. If you just put an autonomous routine in that allows for your robot to move forward for 2 to 3 seconds at a 30% speed and move, just creep. You got 15 seconds to creep forward till your bumper is within the outer works. That can get you 2 points, and 2 points is 2 points. So try to figure out how to make a really simple autonomous to get you the reaching points that you can get during autonomous. Like I said, you don't have to go 100% speed for 5 seconds. Otherwise, you might Dukes a hazard, get stuck on the defense, and then the rest of the 2 minutes and 15 seconds, you can't do anything because your auton went crazy, and now you're out of the match. So be cautious of that. Start slow and slowly work to go faster. Don't start fast and try to reduce it.
And then, yeah, like what Clint was saying is, if you're building a short robot, if you can line up in front of the low goal and be able to, again, go slowly through there and make sure you can get through there reliably, then you've just increased your auton score by being able to go through that defense.
Yeah, I will say that the low bar might be a fairly, highly contended auton location. So meaning when you go to an event, almost every match, my guess is, people are going to be fighting over who gets to go under the low bar. And the thing you need to consider when determining who needs to go under the low bar is who has the most potential to be successful and get the most points. So if there's a team like, let's say Team 33, the Killer Bees, they have an autonomous to go under the low bar, cross the defense, and shoot a ball into the high goal. If they do that reliably every time and the team only crosses the defense, they should have priority on that because they have the potential to get the higher points. But if people say they can do it and they're only 50% successful, that's up to the debate amongst your alliance before the match. So don't be surprised if you have an auton to go into the low bar that someone might want to take that position to get more points in the match. So maybe have an alternative or a secondary autonomous in case that happens.
And then, Clint, one of the questions that we received ahead of time was, is there time to change the autonomous programming if you end up being blocked by another robot when positioning on the field? So what I found is basically that you, in section 3.4.2 of the tournament manual, it says that you'll receive a violation and your robot will be disabled during the match, or before the match, and you'll receive a yellow card at the end of the match if you cause significant and repeated delays to starting the match.
Yeah, so to answer that question, you are not going to be able to probably deploy new code to change your auton when you are on deck or double deck. You won't have enough time at that moment. Now, if you were to, make 2 autonomouses, autonomous 1 and autonomous 2, and you physically have a switch on your robot where you flick it to position 1 or position 2, and that tells your robot run auton 1 or run auton 2, there's more advanced ways to do this as well. You could have that ability built into it if your programmers do that. Look for the switch to see what position it is, and then determine what auton you want to run. But you're not going to be able to download code right before the match because of the amount of time it takes to download the code properly. And you have, when you're on...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so this, as a rookie team, this would be a good opportunity for you to, not just before the match, but a ways before the match, but not like hours before the match, go talk to your alliance partners and kind of set up who's going to do what.
Yeah. So with that is during when you're on deck, double deck and deck, you'll be talking with your alliance members. So in autonomous also, there's not going to be any other robots from the other team that can get in your way, because the red team are on one side, the blue team are on the other side, and no one can cross the midpoint. If they cross the midpoint, they get these huge penalties. So it's not going to be another opponent getting in your way. It's going to be that one of your teammates, your alliance members, might want to have that position. And that'll be a discussion that you have before putting the robot on the field.
So how far ahead of time will you know which defenses are in front of you? Like if we have 3 or 4 different options, can we see when we're standing in the on deck, oh, look, we had to do that thing, let's plan on being there?
Yep. Yep. So the way that it's going to go this year, this is the first time that, we've ever had this kind of defense selection in a game, but the way that it's going to go is when you are on double deck, both alliances, red and blue, will determine what defenses they want in front of their tower that the opponents have to go through. So they will say you have to choose between categories A, B, and D because the audience is going to pick C. You submit that to the defensive coordinator, which is a volunteer position at every event. That defensive coordinator inputs it into the system, and when you move to the deck position, so when you're the next match to be ready to go out on the field, that is when they will give you a printout of the arrangement of the defenses for your match. So they will be telling you what you're going against and where they're positioned physically on the field. So you basically have anywhere from 2 minutes and 30 seconds to about 5 to 7 extra minutes. So you're looking at maybe 10 minutes to discuss what you're going to do, where you're going to be positioned for all the different defenses. And then once the match is over, you'll then have to take the robot on the field and get into position. And as Brandy says, if you create too much delay, you can get penalties. Usually your first event, and if you're a rookie, they're not going to start without you and start giving you red cards and yellow cards because you don't have your robot on the field in the right position, especially your first couple matches. So don't be worried too much about that.
But don't plan on having 10 minutes to deploy new codes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I talked to my boys about making a couple different options, but I guess I wasn't realizing how much time it would take to reprogram the computer to get those different options in. I guess I don't know what the timing of that would be.
Yeah, like I said, the best thing is there's like 3 different ways. One, you have it physically on your robot, so you have a switch that gets put into the digital I/O of the RoboRio. 2, you make a button, maybe a toggle switch on your driver controls that has 2 positions to set your different autonomouses on your driver controls. And probably the third way is more advanced. You have a graphical user interface that your programmers work on where they select the autonomous so that therefore you can have unlimited. Those are kind of like the 3 generic ways you can do it. There's probably a ton of other ways you can do it. But with, like I said, a little bit of research and a little bit of testing beforehand, they don't need to have the robots to test this functionality. So they can do that ahead of time for your programmers.
Okay. Any other questions on that? All right, so the next topic is working on your manipulator. So if you got your chassis up and running, everything's looking good, you can start prototyping manipulators to figure out what you'd like to try to do. So some of the suggested materials to use for prototyping would be wood, or PVC, or that cuttable foam insulation you can get at like Home Depot or Lowe's that you can just cut with like a hot wire. So using a couple different things to develop some concepts, mock up some sizes to see what you're looking for. So say you need to have an intake for the ball. Mock something up that could pull the ball in or to shoot the ball. So yeah, so you can build that out of a couple different items.
Hey, Clint, this is probably where we want to have you come in with the fact that Andy Mark is out of their intake build kit thing and talk a little bit about teams who are looking
someone
into
that. So someone was asking because there's an intake add-on for the kit apart chassis. It's basically a couple bent sheet metal pieces and some axles. Another product that a lot of teams use throughout the season is Vex Pro's VersaFrame. There are tubing with bearing gussets that attach to this tubing, and you can get hex shaft to go across and Coulson wheels to basically make a very, very similar design. Just because, it might not be in a kit form where you say, I want a intake, part number 100. There is, however, like ways that you can make similar roller intakes with other gussets and framing system. Like I said, that would be the Versa frame with, like I said, bearing gussets, and using a bag motor with a Versa planetary that drives the hex shaft. I know I probably sound like I'm talking in a different language to some, but there is stuff out there. If you want to give a call or you got questions to me personally, you can send it to me, and I can kind of show people different options, or give me a call at the Robot Space, and I can help walk people through it. So.
All right. Any other questions on prototyping?
With the prototype, the one thing I want to talk about also is make sure that you, excuse me, you don't, a lot of people start going to like little claws and pneumatic grippers that grab the ball. You have to think that some of these locations that you're going to be interacting with this boulder, it's going to be really hard for the driver to see, right? One thing that we try to say on our team is you don't even want the drivers to think about grabbing the ball or having to, aim or kind of grab onto that ball slowly. So we try to always make sure we always have an active mechanism, right? And an active mechanism, active intake, is usually a motor with a spinning wheel that spins really, really fast, typically 1.5 times your speed. And sorry, someone else was waving at me. 1.5 times the speed to make sure that you intake that ball and the intake's not going slower than your drive. So that when you run into that ball, you acquire that ball, you have possession of that ball, and your drivers don't even have to think. So try to make an active intake, like I said, with some kind of roller or something like that, instead of trying to have a pinch or claw mechanism where it can take you, 5 or 6 seconds of back and forth driving to finally grab that ball.
All right. The next thing is they've released the unencrypted version of the manual on FRC's website. So if you're tired of typing in that password to look at the manual, you can get the unencrypted version. And also there's links there to the previous updates and the question and answer forum. There was a couple things that we noticed in the question and answer updates that we were looking at. One of which they've gone back and forth on is the height of the, or the width of the rock wall. So I think they're still trying to come up with that.
It would be a lot easier to
so another question that we've kind of looked at was the carrying a boulder across your defense, getting into the courtyard, and then backing up to be over the defense to be in like a safe zone. So our interpretation, let me know if you interpret it differently, Clint, is so it looks like as long as you're in contact with the defense and touching the carpet in the courtyard, you're in this protected area where if somebody hits you in that area, then that's a penalty. Is that how you read that update?
Yeah, so you in order to launch, you have to be either in your opponent's courtyard or touching your opponent's tower. In order to be protected by the outer works and the defenses, you need to have at least a part of your bumper within the outer works. So if you have a wheel touching the courtyard and your bumper into the outer works, you should be protected because at that time you it doesn't matter on whether you are traversing or not traversing. You might be traversing, so you're protected. So that's how way we read it.
Okay.
So like I said, if you want a protected shooting spot where people can't run into you when you're taking your shot, if you're touching the courtyard and you have a part of your robot within the outer works, you would be protected at that time.
So that's kind of an interesting rule. So there is a safe zone where you could potentially shoot the ball from that you are protected from getting hit by another robot.
Yeah. But then you do have to remember wherever that shot is, you might be taking more time to move and get, to that, special spot. And if other people, your own partners, are trying to come across that same defense and you're sitting there, there's a lot of game mechanics that during the game, yeah, if you're, on your own practice field, no one else is around, you can sit there all day long, just, take 5 seconds to line up a shot. But also be concerned that you might have partners who are wanting to come across into that zone at that exact same position. So be careful.
And then the other question and answer that came up that we found was interesting was being able to go through like the drawbridge or the sally door, and then being able to basically catch that door as it's swinging back up and then going back through it. So in order to be crossed, you just need to be clear of it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the drawbridge, say, has time to go all the way back up. You have to pull it back down again.
Yeah, you in order to cross the defense, you have to be in the neutral zone, and you have to not touch the defense for a certain amount of time. Not a certain amount of time, you just have to be not touching it for a moment in time. But it has to be very clear to the people that are monitoring this that you stop touching it. So if you are, let's say, 100 milliseconds to not touch it and then touch it again, the referees might not be able to see that. So it's got to be very clear to the referees and people who are gauging whether or not you are touching it to cross that if it was clear to them. So I would say be careful with that. But yes, you could theoretically, pull on have two arms, have one arm holding the door. You pull that arm in, and the other arm on the other side catches it before it closes fully. It does not have to go back to sort of the resting normal state of the defense in order to say that you weren't touching it. So.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, like I said, it's tough to go through all the Q&As. They do have a little searching function, so if you wanted to find rules about reaching and stuff like that, you can search for it. Usually any pertinent information that teams must know about will get it put in an update. Like the width of the rock wall, my understanding on that is they're trying to determine whether or not they are going to change the field to meet the rules that they said at the beginning that people have already started to design to, or will they actually change the dimensions back to, change the dimensions back to what it used to be, or stick with the dimensions it's supposed to be. So I think if the jury's still out, but I expect that to come in Friday's update. I expect you to see that that rule. So be sure to look out for Friday's update. I think that's where it's going to come in. A lot of these other ones we talk about are little caveats that people might go to an event and see people doing stuff and say, oh, it's not allowed, it's against the rules. Well, those teams may have read rules, Q&As, and read clarifications, or even asked to make sure that they are within the rules and they are legal. So be careful if you go to your first event and it looks like someone's doing something illegal. You can question it and say, oh, hey, I want to understand that better. I thought that was illegal, but, can you show me the rule or the Q&A? Because I've seen that happen before from other teams. So it's hard to keep up on all the Q&As, but do your best to try to use it when you can.
Awesome. And if you guys have any other questions throughout the week, feel free to send us an email, and we'll be sure to try to include your questions either on the call or send you an email. Just a side note, if you are going to be sending us a question, please also include your phone number That way, if it's a question that we think you need to know the answer to, or if it's time sensitive, that we can give you a call, because I know some of you guys have your work emails and not your personal emails, so make sure you include your phone number. So the next item on the agenda is that if you have not already ordered your bumper materials, you should do so. This does not mean that you need to start building them now, because some of you still may not know exactly what size your chassis is going to be, but there's lead time on ordering and delivery. So in last week's call, we gave you guys a note of a local place here in Michigan that you can order your bumper material from. They even will include numbers for you if you pay for them. These numbers are very nice. They're very durable. They fall within the specifications. So we highly suggest that you guys take advantage of Robo Promo and order your bumper material through them. The guy that owns the company is super awesome and nice. So if you guys have any questions about bumpers, we will probably do a whole section of an upcoming call on bumpers to make sure that you guys do them correctly. Because in the past, one of the regionals, like 70% of teams, the reason that they did not pass inspection was because of their bumpers. So it is something that you guys will have to pay close attention to. So we'll cover that more in detail. Does anybody have any questions on bumper material?
When you say bumper material, are you referring to the blue and red bumper material that came in the rookie kit, or is that something different?
Rookies do have bumper material in their kit that you can use. Just be sure to, when we say order your bumper material, you might need numbers to go on those bumpers. Not that you might, you actually do need numbers to go on those bumpers. So you might need to order that. The other thing is, depending on your design of your robot and the size of it, you might want to look to make sure you have enough material to cover all of your bumpers in the shapes and sizes that you are doing it. So like I said, be on the, you know, you got to look into it. Don't just assume you have enough bumper material in the kit of parts. Okay.
Okay.
And then tomorrow opens first choice for traditional live orders. Clint, you want to cover this, or Jason, you want to cover this?
You can go ahead, Clint.
If you have any more points left over after the initial, initial first choice, you got 600 points. After kickoff, you got another 150 points. If you didn't spend all 750 points, you now can go in and it's a first come, first serve for the rest of your points. If you didn't do any of the previous ones, you basically have 750 points to try to spend for the rest of the rest of your first choice points. So if anybody has any more questions on that, I mean, you could shoot an email, but I mean, just try to look to see what would help your team the most based on your design. It might be slim pickings now, opposed to going through the priority list that was done before.
All right, awesome. Let me see if there were, so there were a couple other questions about robot that were submitted in. One of the questions was, can we move backwards through a barrier?
Like through a defense?
Yeah, I assume it's a defense that they're asking, can you go backwards? You are allowed to go back through a defense, but in order to get crossing a defense, as the rule states, you have to start in the neutral zone, you have to not be touching that defense. In order to get the point and weaken the defense by 1, you need to fully cross it, which means you start in the neutral, not touching it, you touch the defense, you go over the defense, and you are no longer touching the defense anymore, and for a safe assumption, you're out of the outer works. Once you've achieved that, you can then back up and go back through that defense. However, when you go back through the defense, you are not going to get, you're not going to weaken that defense because you came from your opponent's courtyard going to the neutral zone. That is not considered weakening a defense. You then have to let go of that defense, be in the neutral zone again, and then you can proceed to go across and get another crossing of defense. So you can go back and forth. However, when you go backwards, you're not going to weaken the defense and not get points for that.
And then the second part of this question is, I'm not sure if it's asking, can we go through the back side of a defense, or can we drive our robot backwards through a defense? So,
yeah, you can go backwards.
Do both.
The field does not care which one is the front of your robot. They don't care if you are driving forwards or backwards, as long as you're following the rules that are set for the field. Right? You can drive your robot forward, or you can drive your robot in reverse over a defense. They don't care. The other question was, do you have to close the drawbridge before a second robot can go through?
No.
No.
But my statements that I just went through still remain true. So the way that our team is thinking about the Category C defenses is we're saying the Category C defenses are chivalrous defenses. It is our belief that eventually it is going to turn into a play that happens during the match. And what's going to happen is one of your alliance partner is going to come through that defense from the opponent's courtyard to the neutral zone, and they're going to hold that door open. And then your other two opponents who were in the neutral zone, not touching that defense, are going to cross through that open door, 1, 2 right behind each other, and they're going to totally defeat that defense. And then that defense is no longer an issue, and you've taken that defense down quickly. So a lot of people might be thinking about mechanisms of doing that. We believe that towards the end, you might not need that mechanism because it turns into a play.
You're going to want to check these out in section 3.1.3 of the game manual. Does anyone else have any questions about the defenses before we move on to team management type things? Oh, I see another question. There was a question about scaling. They want to know if you can help another robot scale, like push them up. From what I could find in section 3.4.7, rule G28, the only thing that it says is that you may not come in contact with an opposing robot. It says nothing about that you may not come in contact with your own team's robot. But in order to get the scale, your robot and their robot must both be independently supported by their own rung on the tower.
Yeah, and you got to be fully supported by the tower. I don't know. To cut to the chase, I think it's a pretty good idea. It's a unique idea, how about? However, actually having that function, it'd be very difficult because having your robot match with every, 39 other robots at a district event and make sure that their wheels are spaced correctly and their hook is hooked right, the odds of that happening are very slim to none. There's some games where in the past they've wanted you to hang off of other robots, and that year it was part of the game and you could score more points for that. There was only a few robots that year, and I think throughout the entire season it only happened about 5 times throughout the entire season. And that was actually a way to get additional points in the game, and it only happened about 5 times.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other robot questions before we move on to team management? Okay, we're going to try to breeze through these team management tasks. These are mainly answers to questions that people have asked us the last couple weeks. So recruiting and assigning mentors to tasks. I know that you guys are already 2 weeks in, but we are going to provide you guys with a list of kind of like jobs that people can have. So one of them is like your mechanical or your mechanical engineer. This is obviously going to be the person who's going to be working on and designing the robot. Your electrical person is going to be working with your students to make sure that everything is wired correctly so that when you turn it on, the robot doesn't run backwards when you push the joystick forward, kind of thing. Programming, this is someone who would be working with your students to keep your code clean, keep them on tasks. I will tell you one of the most valuable things a programming mentor can do is keep the students on task. On our team, we have learned that our programmers are the most easily distracted people on our team, and having an adult there to like shoo away the squirrels that they're chasing is very, very valuable. Having someone for team schedules or people management is important. Usually, I will say on most teams, there are 2 lead mentors. One of them is taking care of the people management, and the other one is overseeing the robot. So then some people that you can have, even if it's just a parent, is like travel, carpooling, transportation, making sure that everyone has a ride everywhere you guys are going. If you're not going to be using school transportation, you have to figure out how to get your kids there. Then things like hotels, meals, snacks, team uniforms, those kind of things can be handled by someone who doesn't necessarily have to be one of your main 2 mentors on the team. And then things like awards. The only people that can submit for things like the Dean's List Award, which we talked about last week, is the primary and secondary contact. So if you're not one of those 2 people, you cannot apply for those awards. So if you're looking for more information about the awards, we included a link to that in last week's call. So all of this description is going to be included in the notes for you guys. So if you have any questions on these, you can feel free to email us if you come up with one later. Does anyone have any questions now kind of about mentors before we go down into kind of breaking your team into sections? Okay, great. If you guys come up with anything, just let us know. So breaking your team down into sections. This is going to depend a lot on how many people you have on your team and what your resources are, especially when it comes to people resources. So teams that have a lot of mentors can obviously break down into a few more sections, and teams that have a lot more students can break down into a lot of sections. However, if you're running a team with like 2 adults and 8 students, you might not need to break your team down at all because everyone might be working on everything. So for small teams, a good suggestion for your sub-teams is just mechanical, electrical, programming, and team management or PR, depending on what you want to call it. So basically, some people are going to be building the robot, some people are going to be wiring the robot, some people are going to be programming the robot, and some people are going to be doing all the other non-robot related stuff. So this is just one suggestion that we have for you guys. You can choose to break your team down. You can choose to assign your students to teams. You can choose to let them choose a team or float between the teams.
That's pretty dope.
On Team 23, go ahead. Okay. On Team 23,
wait, but did you see that? The person lifted the gate up with their hand.
So on Team 2337, we have 16 sections on our team, and we do not have any of our students stick to one section if they don't want to. We let them join whatever section they'd like and float between the sections if they want to. Jason, do you want to give a little spiel about team rushes, how they go about sections?
So we break our sub-teams into chassis, above chassis, and our, I think we ended up calling them old group this year, so our object launching device group. And then we have a electrical sub-team, programming sub-team, and then our business sub-team. So again, our chassis, above chassis, and old group are more mechanical focused. The electrical and programming, again, focused on the electrical and programming sides of it, and then the business group is analogous to the team management group.
Awesome. So, I mean, I think for the most part, a lot of teams break themselves down, especially veteran teams, quite similarly. because it seems like the game each year lends itself to breaking down into those sections, especially with the awards that are offered, that each section could kind of have an award that they could pursue. So how you guys break down your team is totally up to you. We're going to give you guys quite a few examples in the notes that you guys will be receiving. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email any one of us. Jason has been doing this for, what, 15-ish years now, Jason? So
as a mentor or as a student?
Total combined.
Total combined? This, I guess, is my 20th season officially, or 19th. I took a year off, but I've been doing first for a while.
Jason knows what's going on. So, and then on our team, I'm the person who does all of the organization and stuff like that. So we're more than happy to share how we do things. We're definitely, in case you guys haven't noticed, not secret keepers. And a lot of times organization is the key to team success, because it doesn't matter how great of a robot you've built. If no one knows to show up to the competition, then that robot doesn't do you any good. Or if they show up to Troy and you're registered for Midland because you didn't send them the information, then that might not be a good thing. So does anybody have any questions on kind of team breakdown or anything like that before we move on to uniform orders?
I do have one quick question.
Sure.
I have my, of my 3 sub-teams that I've done, I seem to have the most in programming, and it's all, everybody wants to do everything. Do you have, and this is just kind of, management, but, do you break down further within that team? If, I mean, there's only 7, but that's, I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
So we've broken it, yeah, we've kind of broken it down into components too. So one team will be responsible for the chassis portion, one would be responsible for the above chassis portion. So that's worked okay. It's kind of tough because you got to combine all those systems together, but that's one way to break it up.
So your programmers are programming for each of those individual things?
Yeah, an individual subsystem.
I'm concerned with.
Well,
I have the most kids in that. So.
Yep. So the programmer. So say you said you have 7 programmers. So I would break them up into 3 groups of 2 and 1 group of 3. And a group of 2 would be responsible for writing all the code for the chassis. And that may include some of the autonomous stuff too. And then one group would be responsible for writing all the code that would be needed for if there's something that's going above the chassis. So any of the roller mechanisms or shooter mechanisms or anything else that you design would be done by that group. And then, well, actually, I guess that'd be split into the group that's doing the shooter would have something different. If you're planning on investigating the vision tracking, so that's something else that could be done, is maybe you could have a group of those students work on maybe like a special project, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to go on the robot, but maybe they want to learn about the vision system, or they want to learn about something else. So we've done that too, where we've had some students kind of work on a separate research project that may or may not get put on the robot, and we kind of let them know that at the start, so they don't feel like their time's a waste. But it may not be integrated to this year's robot, but at least you know about it for next year, is the idea.
All right. On Team 2337, we break down our programming into 2 sections, autonomous and teleop. The autonomous is usually going to be a little bit more involved with like vision system and stuff like that. So that's where we kind of move our vision system, is to the autonomous section. And then the other programmers are working on the teleop, which would be the 2 minute and 15 second driver control period. Another thing that you could do with your programming section is put some of them on their operator interface. So making what the drivers see in front of them aesthetically pleasing and easy to use and integrated into the robot. It sounds a lot easier than what it actually is. We drive our robot with similar to like an Xbox controller type thing. So some of our programmers are programming the buttons on that through your operator interface, talking with the drive team to see which buttons they need to do things, which fires the ball, which turns the intake on, what turns the intake off, what lowers and raises the thing, what allows them to go faster or slower, those kind of things. So you could put someone also in charge of your operator interface or your driver controls.
Wow, this is also helpful. Thank you. I'm gonna play this back for them tomorrow.
And like I said, all of this is going to be in our notes, and we're going to include a link in here to Team Rush's toolkit, which is their phenomenal book that they've written that includes pretty much advice on anything you could possibly ever need advice on. And then also a link to Team 2337 section page on our website, which is nowhere nearly as impressive as the Team Rush's toolkit. But they're both going to be resources that should be helpful to you.
All right, great, thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have any questions on breaking your team down?
Well, I just wanted to give a suggestion. This is my first year, obviously, and I have a lot of programmers as well who've done all of their programming by themselves in their mom's basement in their lazy boy, and they were not understanding the concept of working together. And I had a local gentleman who programs for a living with people all over the world come in and talk about how you need to learn how to do your part and do it well, but still be able to mesh it with other people who are doing their part.
That will be a perpetual problem with all of your programmers. That was like the alliteration of alliterations. Yes, forever, programmers will be, try to be self-sufficient, but not know what they're doing, think they know everything, and continuously get distracted. We've been doing this for long enough to know that that is always going to be a problem, always, and it's something that you guys are going to have to combat. So having an adult there to more or less babysit at the beginning will be helpful to you, and then as the season progresses, have that person try to wrangle them in and teach them some new skills. We've discovered on our team, all the coders think they know how to code. And then you put LabVIEW in front of them, and they're like, I have no idea what this is. What am I supposed to be doing with this? So.
That's a great programmer voice.
Right? Thanks. Yeah. For any of you guys that were at my workshop at the day after kickoff, you heard a lot of my impressions. So, do you guys have any other questions about breaking your team down before we go on to uniforms? All right, this shouldn't take long. Most of the information that you're going to need is going to be in the notes here for you. But just my primary things for you guys. Number one, make sure that the color of your shirt and the text color that you choose to put on it is easy to read from far away. Go with contrasting colors. If you have a black shirt, don't screen print it with navy blue because you won't be able to read it. Like if you're going to choose like, oh, we want to go with our school colors, which are light blue and dark blue, then you might want to reconsider changing one of those colors so it's not the primary colors of your uniform. Maybe instead you could choose a light blue shirt one day and a dark blue shirt the other day and put white text on the light blue and black text on the dark blue. Whatever, just make it so that you can read it from far away. Your team number will need to be very prominent. 99.9% of the time at competition, you will be referred to by your team number. Your school will not define who you are. I bet half of the teams that I am even familiar with that are well known in the FIRST community, half of them I couldn't even tell you which high school they go to. It will not define you. I know in sports it's very important, like Grand Blanc is the Bobcats, and the Bobcats. In robotics, we're the engineers. We have nothing to do with our school, except for we decided to maintain our school's colors. So our team colors are black, white, and red. So it's up to you what you want to do, unless your school district is dictating to you that you have to be named after your school mascot and have your school colors. This is an opportunity for your robotics team to create an identity for themselves that the students will relate to and will help them be proud of what they've built. So that's just something for you to think about, whether or not you're going to take on your team's, your school's mascot, et cetera. If you choose not to take on the mascot, make sure that the logo that you designed for your uniforms for screen printing is not really detailed. When you go to have things screen printed, if somebody has like sketched this beautiful, intricate logo that you guys are like, that's awesome, that needs to be our logo, and it has tons of like brush strokes and different details and all this different stuff, it's going to be impossible to screen, and when they do screen it from far away, it's going to look like a blob. So choose something that is easy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an animal or a certain thing. Like the Engineers, our team logo on the front of our shirts, it's a red face, is the international symbol for safety glasses. And Team Rush, you guys, their logo is just the letters R-U-S-H in this really nice font. So it's up to you guys what you want to do there. So you can do a little bit of research and see what the other teams are doing, but it's up to you. One piece of advice, I know not all teams do this, but we have found that it works well for us, is that we have a different color shirt for every single day. So Thursday we wear a red shirt, Friday we wear a black t-shirt, and then on Saturday we wear a dress shirt. This is because the district that we are in, we were having a lot of trouble with students not wearing clean clothes, so we designated a different color shirt for each day. The first team that I was ever
I would like to say I don't think that is because of our district we're in. It's because we're talking about high school boys mainly who have a tendency to not wash their shirts and wear the same one over and over again. So we fix that, excuse me, by only having one shirt with a different color each day, so you force them to change their shirt every day instead of, wearing the same one over and over and over again.
And we always make the joke on our team on Red Shirt Day, nobody wants to be the black sheep of the family and show up in their black shirt. So now Team Rush, you guys do the opposite, right? You guys have the same, you give the student two
of the same shirts. Yep. So there's not a different color shirt for the day. We just hopefully make sure that they bring both of them and they swap them out.
Which makes it cheaper. If you guys are looking to, oh, hey, Kyle. Which makes it cheaper. You guys are going to order 1,000 of the same shirt.
Right. It's a lot cheaper having the same shirt on the same color on the same shirt. The other thing that we do is now they have, if there's an additional day, they use the year before, and we always know what year is on the back of their shirt. So we can see shirts look identical from year to year, but the back is different by the sponsors. And so they will always be a gold shirt at a tournament.
Which brings us to our next
I'm a
point,
creeper. I creep onto your phone calls. I've been listening the whole time.
With my Febreze. So, which brings us, Kyle, brings us to our next point, which is having your sponsors or your partners on your uniforms. First does not dictate what you should and should not put on your team uniforms. Our first year, we had our top 3 sponsors on the back of our uniforms, and that's it. We had Chrysler, our build facility, Premier, and I think GM or something, or Davidson Tool Engineering, our first 3 sponsors that made our rookie year possible. Clint, can you take over? I got to go to Lucas.
Sure. So put your sponsors on your shirt because they give you lots of money, and also put them on your banners that are in your pits. And don't be afraid to charge, more or less, quote unquote, charge your partners or sponsors more money for a bigger logo. It never hurts to ask someone for 5 to 10 grand and they give you 2 grand. Because if you never ask for 5 or 10, you'll never get 5 or 10.
And so
Rush,
it's up to you. First does not, thanks. First does not dictate what you need to put or how big it needs to be. That's up to you. So we have a document that says for $10,000 you get this, for $5,000 you get this, for $200 you get this. And the more money you give, the bigger your logo is. You can choose to put every one of your sponsors that you have on your shirt. Totally up to you. The thing that I will warn you will be difficult is getting a high enough quality logo for all of your sponsors to screen print, because they have to be a vector file for most screen print companies to be able to manipulate it. So that might be a problem. So some of you guys might choose to do just text on some of your shirts. It's up to you. Totally up to you. A lot of places that you go to, the screen printing places, will give you advice on this. We, in the past, have gotten our shirts printed at Flint City T-shirts in Flint. Don't drink the water there, but they make good T-shirts. So you can go there, and they do all of the artwork, and everything is all included. Some places charge you for artwork or charge you per screen. It's all going to depend on where you go. And right now we go through a place that's in the Clio area called Kidco, is who we get all of our stuff through now. I don't know, Kyle, if you have a place that you'd like to recommend down your way?
We use OCTs in Pontiac, but I also want to mention that students, if you have a graphics art program, see if they can help you digitize logos so that you can get them in graphic form, and or they may even be able to do a logo for you and or even do the back, all the artwork for the back of the shirt. So graphics programs, the kids can do it. I mean, our kids know how to use Illustrator, and they can make the vector graphics needed.
And I think that's, one of the questions that we got on the call was about event schedules, but does anybody have any questions about uniforms before we move on to the last couple questions that were on the call? All right, awesome. So about event schedules, the question that we had was on Thursdays, what are the hours the team needs to be at the competition? So right now, the schedule for all of the events is not out yet. I will include a link. So when it's live, you'll be able to click on the link, and it'll take you to the documents. Each school might be a little bit different where you're attending. It's what, if we go off of last year's schedule, which was pretty much uniform, on Thursday, it was 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. is load-in, inspection, practice matches, and calibration. It's important for you to be available on Thursday to load in and to check in and to get inspected, because inspection takes a long time. Waiting until Friday is not a good choice. To start loading in on Friday, not good, because for the most part, you have to be ready by 10 o'clock in the morning on Friday, and the doors don't open until 8. And they say that they have to have the schedule done 1 hour before opening ceremonies, which only gives you from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock to load in, get inspected, and everything else, which is not going to happen. And if the entire tournament is waiting on you to show up because they cannot make the match tournament schedule until you are there, some people are not going to be very happy. So you need to make sure that you can be there on Thursday. Even if it is just your pit crew, you need to be there on Thursday. So I've included a basic schedule from last year in the notes so you can kind of see what Thursday, Friday, and Saturday look like. But please be aware that this may change based on this year's schedule. So I think that that's all we have for you, unless anyone else has any questions. I know it's about 20 after 7 right now, so we might have lost quite a few people. But if you have any other questions, go ahead.
All right. I think we're good. Yep, so we'll send out the information and the recording from today's call and the notes probably tomorrow, and the information for next week's call also tomorrow. But again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to email any of us, and we'll get those questions answered. All right, everyone have a good week. Thanks.